Clap. Thank you for reminding me. Thanks, Gwen.
Okay, thanks again. We welcome today Matt Cybulski. He, as he said, is the Managing Director of Energy and Petrochemicals for Jobs Ohio. And that's our state private nonprofit economic development organization. Obviously, in our portion of the state in Southeast Ohio, we partner with the partner Ohio Southeast. He's an economic development professional with a Master's of Public Administration and 15 years or more of business experience. And we also hear that he'll be integral in the planning of the Intel project for Jobs Ohio. And also with us is Larry Mary. He's been the Belmont County Port Authority Director since 2006. And prior to that, he was a county commissioner and another Port Authority Director in Muskingum, as well as a township trustee. He is also a great partner in economic development in Noble County. Our county commissioners have an MOU with the Belmont Port, and he's a lifelong operator of an 800-acre dairy farm. He serves on the Ohio Oil and Gas Association board as a landowner. So we're very fortunate to have these two with us to share updates on the energy sector.
Thanks, Gwen. Larry, do you want me to lead off? And
Yeah, let the smart guy talk first.
well, and Dan, how much time do we have? Because there's certain things I can gloss over, and then other things I do want to spend some time on.
You have a half hour
Okay.
easily.
Got it. Well, thank you again, everybody. For those that aren't as familiar with Jobs Ohio, and as Gwen mentioned, we're a private company. We've been around for about 11 years. Governor Kasich created us when he took office in an effort to privatize economic development in the state, and it truly is private. There are a few other states in the country that operate private economic development entities, but they are still very tied to the government. They get money from the state legislature. We have a funding stream through the state liquor franchise. We did a 25-year bond sale back in 2013. So we're almost 10 years into that 25-year lease. And that money, so the sale of spirited liquors, the profits from those sales come to Jobs Ohio, actually a separate entity called the Jobs Ohio Beverage System, which allows us to operate. And I can give you guys some examples later on of how we use our money, but our funding is used for economic development programs such as grants, brownfield redevelopment, workforce training grants, low interest loans, a whole slew of things. And then we also have a contract with the state, the Ohio Department of Development. They were previously Development, then Development Services Agency. Now they're back to Ohio Department of Development. We have a contract with them to also kind of negotiate on behalf of, but with their final blessing, certain state incentives like job creation tax credits and things of that nature. So we have a very unique structure. We have a 9-member board of directors that's appointed by the governor, but they're executives of companies that are located. And we have about 120 folks internally at Jobs Ohio. And as Gwen mentioned, we rely heavily on our regional partners, Ohio Southeast being the group that covers basically from Zanesville on east up to Carroll County, and then down to just past County, getting over towards Brown County area. And then I think Erica's on. I'm a native of Steubenville. So Erica, I think she said she covers Jefferson and Harrison County. I'm a native of Steubenville, so very familiar with the region. As part of our structure at Jobs Ohio, we focus on 10 industry clusters. All 10 are kind of traditional clusters and sectors that Ohio's been successful at over the years. Energy and chemicals being one of them. And as I'm sure all of you are aware, we've had a big chemicals industry dating back to the Rockefeller days, and then 12 years ago with shale development, we really have that upstream, midstream, and downstream presence now. This is just we use this to communicate to companies. And I should mention our sole mission at Jobs Ohio is to create economic development through helping companies expand that are already here in the state, as well as attract new opportunities to the state. So when we're talking to companies that aren't familiar with Ohio or they're looking to set up shop, this is one image that will show relevant to our sector to depict the robust infrastructure that we have, from upstream, which is the black circles, squares, and triangles in Eastern Ohio, to midstream, all the red fractionators, processors, and then the downstream chemicals, refineries, power plants, and then the pipeline. So we just always we never want to assume that folks are familiar with everything that's going on in Ohio. So what's going on in our sector? There's a great deal of change happening within the energy, primarily energy, but also chemical sector, with federal mandates, new laws, some global environmental sustainability goals that companies are stating. So I kind of have two different buckets of focus for my sector: upstream, midstream, and downstream focus. This has been the last several years what our focus has been. The upstream piece, with gas drilling, we're pretty stable right now. It was interesting when COVID happened. People stopped traveling, both by car and air. That really hurt the oil market, of course, and a lot of the shale development down in Texas, gas and oil, they shut down because their primary product was oil. That actually buoyed a lot of our gas production in Eastern Ohio to kind of keep everything afloat. And that helped because, as many of you know, the drillers that we have in Ohio are independent, smaller independent companies. So things are pretty stable there. The cold winter and some other global issues have buoyed the gas industry pretty well. Midstream is also pretty built out. That's the fractionators, processing plants, and then the pipelines that get product out to markets. I always explain to folks that when a gas well is drilled, especially in Eastern Ohio, there's a lot of different product that comes out: the natural gas, and then the natural gas liquids like ethane, propane, and butane. They all have to be separated out. They have different markets. So they're sent by rail, by pipe, to different end users. So that's all pretty much built out. We are trying to work with the Public Utilities Commission here in Columbus to get cheap gas to all Ohioans. And by that, I mean the natural gas pipeline system in the state is old, and we still pull a lot of gas from the Gulf and from out west. With all the cheap gas we have in Eastern Ohio, we want to try to get that to other parts of the state, but there's a lot of regulatory headaches that you have to go to replumb the system. And then the downstream focus is help the existing companies potentially take advantage of these new, relatively new natural gas and natural gas liquid products. At the very least, very cheap natural gas, much cheaper than most of the rest of the world. Help companies that are already here, but also try to look for new opportunities, whether it's the PTT ethane cracker, which I'll give an update on if folks want to hear that, in Belmont County, the Shale cracker that'll be coming online just northwest of Pittsburgh later this year. And then I also help a lot of my sector colleagues that run other sectors, and Gwen mentioned the Intel deal. I'm helping on some of those aspects. This is just a snapshot of what's been built out for our sector the last several years. This is kind of pre-2011. This is how it looks now. So I note here 93 billion invested. That's from 2011 to 2020. We've had a great deal of investment in upstream, midstream, downstream gas and chemicals. And we do this because as you add value to natural gas and natural gas liquids, more value is created, more jobs are created, more investment. So why do we want the cracker to happen? As you take the natural gas and you take the natural gas liquid, specifically ethane, and you turn it into ethylene, well, that then goes into a lot of different products. And so we hope for the spin-off effect. This is just some data, and I'm zipping through some of this, and always happy to talk in more detail, and I'm open to questions, but I do have a lot to get through in the next 20 minutes or so. Really, the key here is since 2011, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, it says New York here for the green, but they banned fracking a long time ago, so I don't think they should get any credit. But since then, our region represents 85% of the shale gas growth in the US. And that's interesting because when I talk to companies, specifically international companies that are looking to invest in Ohio, they hear about shale development and they automatically think Texas or North Dakota. And then you show them this chart and it really opens their eyes to the amount of activity that we've had in our region. So some of our key sector achievements, I mentioned the 93 billion, that's tracked by Cleveland State University. They're going to be finalizing their first half of 2021 numbers next month. There's some data lag that it takes them a little while to collect. So they'll be finishing that. Continue to work on more downstream projects. Gas pipelines, that's always important to help keep production going and also bring gas to the other parts of the state. The power plants, all of this has happened, and we have some of the lowest electric prices we've seen in the state because of the shift to natural gas-fired power plants, and then CO2 reductions, emissions have been reduced by about 40%, and that's come as a price to the coal industry, but we've still been able to achieve a great deal, all while reducing emissions by a significant amount. And then hopefully we land the PTT project, which that'll allow Larry Mary to ride off into the sunset and enjoy his remaining years at the farm. Our key partnerships, I can't win projects, especially in my sector, without these partners: EPA, ODNR, ODOT, the Rail Commission. I need to update this to reflect the new name of Development Services Agency to ODOD, Department of Tax, PUCO, OPSB, Army Corps of Engineers. I always tell people, and it's no slight to a warehouse project, but building a chemical plant is an awfully a lot more complex than building a warehouse, and you have permitting issues, you have a great deal of infrastructure that's needed for these projects. So these partnerships are critical. Some permitting examples, we really tout this. The PTT project, they got their air permit in about 4 months, same with a large paper facility in south of Columbus in Circleville. And this is not that Ohio EPA is skirting any rules for projects. It's that they have a great team, but they have a very predictable process and they have a team that walks companies through the whole permit process. That way, when the application is submitted, it's complete and accurate, and it allows for projects to get permitted very quickly. The Intel deal is obviously one that a lot of people have their eyes on. They're working through that permitting process now and should be issued by this summer. Now, the emerging sector trends, which I think might be of more interest to some of the folks that based on their focus on this call, recycling and sustainability is one that we've been really focused on. And in fact, some of your colleagues at Ohio State spoke to my colleagues last week on kind of the waste management, whether it's a football game or, just the ecosystem of the university. Generates a lot of waste. There's a lot of value in waste. And we've been dealing with projects over the last few years of companies wanting to take a waste product. Traditionally, it's plastics, and turn it into something, whether it's a fuel, which is difficult to do economically, technology-wise, or some other recycled product. So I'm working with some of my colleagues, the auto industry, auto sector, advanced manufacturing, and food and ag sector. And because, on the food processing side, and there's a lot of packaging that is difficult to deal with on the recycling side. So we're joining forces on the sector team. We have a consultant that's helping us understand how we can take advantage of recycling and show companies, whether it's a P&G or any other company that operates in the state, that we're trying to figure out ways to help them get their recycled material out of the landfill and into reusable products. And it's very complicated. The last year, I've learned a great deal about the waste business. It's a lot more complicated than I ever thought. Electric vehicles, we have several projects right now related to the battery component of manufacturing. So some battery plants looking at the state. There's a lot of chemicals that go into those batteries, but also those companies want their facilities to be powered by renewables. The fact that Ohio is a deregulated state, you don't have to have, and it's not really feasible to have an on-site solar for, say, a 500 megawatt facility, but trying to marry up solar developers, primarily solar. Wind has its challenges in the state legislature, but trying to marry up renewables with these companies, that's another focus of mine. There's a big push towards hydrogen, which I'm going to spend some time on, and then I did mention the renewable piece. Some of you may have heard about this hydrogen push that came out of the infrastructure bill. Hydrogen is currently produced or used as a feedstock in heavy manufacturing, steel, fertilizer, petrochemicals. So there's a push to clean up hydrogen. It's not a new technology. It's just how do we clean it up for decarbonization efforts, for financing, ESG efforts by companies, government mandates, global competition. So there's this color spectrum of hydrogen, and some of you may be experts in this more so than me. I'm admittedly trying to learn every day on hydrogen because it's a big focus. There are some uses, power generation, transportation, that seems to be a little bit farther off on the economies of scale, but the heavy industry is a big focus. The color spectrum that's just my own terminology because it helps me keep things straight. Gray hydrogen is what's typical now, using natural gas. Blue hydrogen is still using the natural gas to create hydrogen, but it's capturing the carbon and either at the production point or prior to it being burned and emitted from the facility smokestack, taking that carbon and sticking it into the ground using the technology of carbon capture and sequestration, putting it into impermeable rock. That is being done only in, I think, one site in either, I believe, in central Illinois. It's a rather complicated permitting process at the US EPA level, but more states are looking at how to do this at the state level, including Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Then you have green hydrogen, which is producing hydrogen using a renewable energy. The economics aren't there yet, but it seems to be gaining momentum. There are some green hydrogen projects in Europe and Asia. There was one that was recently announced in Oklahoma. So we're seeing more activity there. This is just an image of taking that carbon, sticking it underground. Some of it can be maybe injected underground and recovered later for other use, but we're seeing a lot of this carbon capture, sequestration, and permanent storage potential. There needs to be specific geology, and this Mount Simon formation, it looks really thin on this image. It doesn't do it justice, but Western Ohio seems to have really good geology for carbon capture. There are a couple of companies that are looking in Eastern Ohio along the river in the salt formations and some other formations to see if that's feasible for storage. And so that's happening. And the reason all this is kind of hitting us right now is as part of the infrastructure bill that was passed, signed into law in November, the federal government is looking at establishing at least 4, now we're hearing maybe more than 4 hydrogen hubs What the hub looks like, everybody has a different opinion, but the whole goal for this is to have the federal government inject money, $2 billion per hub, to be led by the private sector to improve hydrogen technologies in order to reduce hydrogen production, to get hydrogen to $1 a kilogram by 2030. That's a very ambitious goal. A lot of people don't think that that's going to be happening, but they don't think that we'll get there that quickly, but certainly possible. So 2 of these hubs have to be focused on fossil fuel based technology. So we're seeing a lot of push on the natural gas side, which makes a lot of sense. One will be green hydrogen, which is the renewable piece, and then one will be pink, which is nuclear focused. The Department of Energy started trickling out information last week. The final RFI will be released in May, and then grants will be awarded in November. So there's a few groups pushing this in Ohio, and why this is happening. This quote from the U.S. Steel executive is really all driven by these companies targeting their net zero emissions by 2050. And so a lot of these companies are positioning to get a hydrogen hub. Ohio is well positioned because of our industrial base and our natural gas production. We do have 2 nuclear plants in Northwest Ohio, so there's a pink group. These are the kind of 3.5 groups that are vying for some of this. So some of you may hear about this, maybe out in your communities, or if you have questions, I've been fielding a lot of questions. Well, what's Jobs Ohio going to do on this? Which I'll get to. But we've got this group that's led by Case Western and University of Toledo on the pink hydrogen piece, the Ohio Clean Hydrogen Alliance, Cleveland State, Stark Transit Authority, and then other companies. This other group, Tri-State Cooperative Effort, they're based out of Pittsburgh, but they're looking more at a tri-state effort. Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. And a lot of their companies have assets in at least 2 of the 3 states, Equinor, Marathon, including MPLX, GE, US Steel, and Mitsubishi does the turbines, and they're actively involved in some of our power plants in the state. And then DT Midstream and Mitsubishi, I don't know if DT is going to join one of these other groups or if they're going to go on their own. They haven't made up their minds yet. And really, I see this as an attraction opportunity. If Ohio can be seen as a place for new clean hydrogen technology, one, it'll help our industrial base pivot to a more environmentally friendly process, and kind of be seen as a retention tool. If you look at some of the refineries we have up in the Toledo and Lima area, and other heavy industry areas, but also a potential attraction piece to say, hey, companies that are trying to push towards their net zero goals, Ohio is a good place for you. I would envision Jobs Ohio is going to do a letter of support for all these groups. That's probably the extent of it right now. And then if a winner is selected, we'll work different projects, but there's still a lot of work to go. I've been talking to folks in the governor's office, ODNR, EPA, and the legislature, because I feel like our legislature is a little bit behind. Some states that are positioning themselves for this are passing resolutions, really kind of soft commitments, but they're at least statements acknowledging hydrogen and some of these efforts. We haven't gotten there yet, but we are starting to make some progress. There's a call tomorrow I have with the governor's office, ODNR, and EPA. And then Battelle is doing a kind of an informational webinar because they're involved in a few of these groups. And given their experience getting federal dollars, they're going to kind of give their insights. So 2022 outlook, as I wrap this up, the traditional gas, liquids, chemicals focus, that's still there. Trying to better understand the recycling and sustainability, help on the EV side, renewables, trying to get more solar developments in the state responsibly, balancing the land use concerns that some folks have with the corporate goals that other companies have, and working through that, and then understanding this hydrogen opportunity. Here's a map. This has just been updated of the renewables. This is all from the Ohio Power Siting Board. We update this pretty frequently. And I do want to touch on, these are just some images. Folks don't always understand, well, why can't we get a cracker inland, or why can't we get some of these projects? Why do they always want to look along the river, or whatever the case is? These are some of the pieces. This was moved from the river near Steubenville into the Cadiz area, Hopedale, actually, a couple of years ago, 310 feet long. I think one of these trailers broke down for a couple of days. So there were some issues in the Wintersville area, which caused some concern, but it's the length of a football field, this tower. Some of these other pieces of equipment are a little bit smaller, moved by rail, but some very challenging logistics. And this is a cracker furnace unit that was brought into Texas I think this was from about a year and a half ago, but all this facility is prefabricated offshore and shipped in. Now, if the PTT project were to happen, this would be probably cut into quarters because of the height restrictions on the river. But this is why we lose out and have lost out on projects to the Gulf, because sites are right along the ocean that you could ship this in, basically roll it off, and it's already pretty well on its way to construction. Saves a ton of money, billions of dollars, in fact. So these are just some images that I like to show. Some folks on this call are familiar. This is the Utica, East Ohio facility in Harrison County, processing plant where they take the gas and liquids and separate them out and pipe them out and rail out some of the product, store some of it in the spheres and in the storage tanks. And then on the PTT side, given some of you in your locations, we've been working on this for a long time. Larry and I have bonded. We've had some, haven't really cried. We've yelled at each other a few times, but this is a nice little timeline. We first got engaged with PTT 10 years ago. They have a joint venture ownership in a chemical plant in Cincinnati that we helped them on an expansion with. And then July of 2013, they approached us about a potential cracker. That's going on 9 years. It'll be 9 years this July when we got the first call, and we still don't have an FID, a final investment decision. But to date, we've put in a little over $50 million on the site. They have all their permits. I will mention, some of you, I think this week will read in the news that their air permit is expiring this week. They're working on a new one because with some redesign of the plant, along with the net zero commitments that companies are making, PTT, they're in the same boat. Their emissions, their redesign is reducing their air emissions, so they're going to redo their air permit. So hopefully, I think some of the opposition of the project will cheer that their air permit expired, but they're going to redo it and get a new one issued this summer. We're still hopeful that, obviously, that they build the facility. It would have a huge economic impact to the area, but they have a long way to go. They are still looking for a project partner. This is the site back in May. These were from mid-December. A lot of grading has been done. It really is a ready site. The power plant was shut down in 2009, 2010. Biggest employer and tax base for the community of Shadyside. We helped pay. Well, we paid for the demolition of the power plant to make the site developable. And that's how our creative and private structure helps. We're able to create our own processes of how we use our funds. And this project was, prior to Intel, was going to be one of the biggest we've ever seen in the state, investment wise at one time. And so our board of directors said, yeah, let's go ahead and spend the money ahead of time to prep this site so that it can be developed when PTT goes FID. That, of course, hasn't happened yet, which we're disappointed in, but we do have some protections, and there are other ways that we might be able to redevelop that site. But PTT's been a good partner. I strongly believe that if not for COVID, they'd be under construction right now, because they were very close to financing prior to the world shutting down 2 years ago. So we'll see. But, and then this is the image, relatively recent image of the ethane cracker that's being built in Monaca, Pennsylvania, just northwest of Pittsburgh. Larry and I first met when Shale was looking at the tri-state region for this site, and for other reasons. They picked the Pennsylvania site 10, 11 years ago, but we showed them the PTT site and they always have liked it. And this doesn't do the Shell cracker justice, but shows you how complex this facility is. This is it's a much larger facility than what this image shows, but just gives you a sense of all the different aspects of it. And then finally, just some recent sector wins in my sector. Sherwin-Williams made some news about a year and a half ago. They're building a new headquarters in downtown Cleveland and R&D center out in Brecksville in the suburbs. Church & Dwight, they make Arm & Hammer baking soda and cat litter in Northwest Ohio, and they seem to be investing every couple of years, so really good company. And then Cow is a cosmetics company in Cincinnati, Japanese owned, and they are building a new manufacturing and R&D facility. So those are just some snapshots, but I went a little bit over time, but would be happy to answer any questions that the group might have. And if not now, I'm always happy to answer questions via email or give me a phone call or whatever. I'm always happy to engage. Larry, did I leave anything out?
Well, first and foremost, I think that they probably have seen how wonderful it would be for a guy like me to work with you, Matt. One of the things that really Matt understands what's at stake in Eastern Ohio, because he's a native here. He grew up here, and he saw a lot of our cornerstone type businesses and employers go away. It even affected his family when he was growing up, when the steel was going away. So he gets what's at stake here. And, the oil and gas, a lot of the drilling is going to go up and down. One of my big pushes to try to get this cracker is that, our coal that was produced all over Eastern Ohio and the tri-state region, the power that was generated from it went to other parts of the country to provide jobs and things. I want to see part of this resource developed here in this region, providing jobs and employing our people and allowing our youth to stay here instead of moving to other parts of the country to find employment. I don't want us to just be, again, having the jobs in extraction are great, and they're nice jobs and good paying jobs. But I want some of the finished product produced here. And Matt and JobsOhio can't say enough good about them. They have invested in our region. They have listened to our needs. They're a continual great partner for our economic development directors like Gwen and I to work with and to help our communities. They understand what we need and have been very responsive, and Matt's been a big part of that. It is again, I think it's very obvious from that presentation some of the capabilities the young man has, and just very thankful that we have him in this region representing the core type resources that we have that fit into his sector and his willingness to work with us. Belmont County, haven't recently looked at the totals, but I think we're still the #1 gas producing county in the state of Ohio. We've recently had 2 companies move into one of our parks that JobsOhio was a big part in. I was able to convince the board and the property owner 10 or 11, 12 years ago to sell a piece of property. And I think there are 8 companies now located in that park. The 2 that located, one of them is a company that basically develops the sites for the wells to be drilled. 125 employees and looking to grow. They think they've got contracts, which tells me that there's going to be a lot of drilling coming to the region. We're going to see an uptick of it. I don't think it'll go back to the level maybe 16, 17, 18, but you're going to see several more wells go in, and that's going to be a good thing for the property owners, the people that live here, and the jobs, and just the investment in the region, and continue to prove that we need something like the ethane cracker to use. Why? Number one, it puts more value to these wells and having a product that's basically almost in their way right now, and it would give it a use and actually a value, and then the finished product out of the cracker would be instrumental in supplying resin to the many companies in Ohio. Ohio has a great sector, plastics industry sector, and things. So, I'm probably the dumb one in the crowd here, but have had the benefit of working with a lot of people. I remember Dale. Dale was instrumental in educating property owners and things, and played such an important part in the early goings of the oil and gas moving to our region. And so this continued effort by everybody working together, I'm thrilled to see this group working and working together and keeping this mission of making this it's a very, and they talked about my oil and gas board position. I think I've got 10 or 11 wells on my farm, and trust me, those 10 or 11 wells take up a whole lot more ground than the sites that now are drilled from. I've got pipes strung all over the farm, some of them in the ground, some of them on top of the ground, to the traditional wells, minor traditional wells. And when I look at the footprint of these wells that might be 4 or 5 acres, but they are, draining hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres of ground from that one location, where technology for the rural communities, so much less intrusive environmentally, and just and the impact that it has on the property. So I think the industry is great. I think they continue to work to get better, and they continue to employ people, which is basically, in my opinion, the bottom line from my aspect. So I'm gonna shut up, and you guys may have questions for Matt, and if you have a dumb question, I'll handle it.
Josh, I think you raised your little virtual hand earlier.
Yeah, my little cartoon hand. Yeah. Matt, thanks for that presentation. That was excellent. I don't know if it'd be possible to get your slides if there's stuff that's proprietary, or if you could share some version of it, but would love to have that.
Yeah, it's a large file size, so I have to upload it to a box folder or something, but I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, we can handle that on our end. Just a quick question about the site in Belmont that the cracker might be located at. Is there I take it there must already, because of the previous plant that was there, there's already a pipeline or the infrastructure in there to get gas to that site?
Yeah, it's a good question. The gas line near the site is actually pretty small, and there would need to be an upgrade on natural gas, but the cracker plant itself would only use a small amount of natural gas. The ethane that is used as the feedstock for the facility, they would build a whole new line because we have a couple of ethane lines in the area, but they're for other markets. So for the Shell facility, I actually don't have a good map on this one, but the Shell facility in Monaca, they actually built the Falcon pipeline, that's the name of it, out of Harrison County, Ohio, northeast into Monaca as its dedicated ethane line. So the PTT site, they would have something very similar. The good thing about the PTT site, and Shell actually has told us this and other companies, is the PTT site's actually in the bullseye, if you will, of all of the infrastructure, the processing plants, the fractionators that separate out the ethane in the region, because MPLX handles about 75-80% of that, because they have facilities in Houston, Pennsylvania, a few different ones in West Virginia that aren't very far away. And then Harrison County, if you kind of draw that circle, that would actually allow them to have multiple ethane lines into the plant, which is desirable because, one, we don't have much ethane storage. There's a project in Monroe County that will go if PTT goes, and that would be salt storage in the salt dome underneath the ground. But having redundant ethane lines into the plant would be ideal. The PTT site allows for that, but that would be built out if it happens. The other piece is power. The facility would be about 140 megawatts. There's strong power infrastructure, not only because it was a former power plant site, but with all the oil and gas activity in the area, AEP, it's funny, the power plant was a First Energy power plant, but it's actually AEP service territory. AEP built just south of the project site a new substation a couple of years ago, really to help the whole region and some of the new investment that's been there, but they built it to size to help power the cracker. So long-winded answer, really good infrastructure, but a new ethane line would be built for the cracker itself.
Gotcha. Thanks. And I just wanted to echo Larry's comments earlier. It's so important to be able to build on the natural resources we have in the state and to find a way to take that to a, more value added, if you will, product that can then be sold through jobs and facilities that are here in Ohio. I think of the ag industry, for example, and our friends at the Farm Bureau remind us that ag is the #1 industry in Ohio, but it's not just the crop and livestock production. It's once you add all the food processing and all the value added that comes, that you really get to that number. So appreciate what Larry said too. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And we do have a food and ag sector, since it is so important. I think Dale knows my colleague Tim Derrickson that runs that sector, but that's a big one. And he and I partner up on projects because, a lot of energy goes into those, whether it's a food processing plant or whatever. And then we've got our other sectors handle kind of the packaging aspect. And so we work very closely together to kind of capture the full value chain and help each other out.
Yeah, Tim and I actually are friends and have known each
good.
other since he was back in the General Assembly. So we've worked together for a number of years. He's great.
Yeah.
And then, by the way, the recycling piece that you mentioned, I don't know if it's the meeting with Karthik last week, but if that's the one you were thinking of, that was me.
Oh, good.
I was the Ohio State person on that.
Nice.
So,
well,
yeah.
Good. Yeah, Karthik and I. He's an engineer by trade, so he understands some aspects much better than I. But we've been teaming up the last couple of years because we recognize the need for just getting smarter with the recycling piece. Also trying to figure out what projects are real and some are kind of pie in the sky. So we team up on that. So that's good to know, Josh, that you connected up with him. And one of the specific projects that we're working on, I think, has a lot of potential, and it's pretty intriguing. And so anyway, good to know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's nice. Rumpke is also someone they've been talking with on that,
Yep.
as you know, and we just announced a new collaboration between the university and Rumpke. So
Yep.
very cool. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you.
One other thing, I guess I'll use the sales pitch, but due to Jobs Ohio, I would say, Matt, that Belmont County's site, if the ethane cracker wouldn't happen, is without a doubt the #1 river site in the state of Ohio. Many projects, I watch them come across and think, yeah, that would go there too. So we do have plan B and C and D if we get the tragic news that they can't move forward with the project. And you know, there's even possibilities of someone else picking it up, maybe even, but you know, but to me, it's the best fit. And if we can make it work, it has so many long range into the future aspects to it that just affect a wide range of projects that would make Ohio more competitive. And then I'll put on my old dairy farmer hat. I've always thought, and Ohio does have, and even Belmont County, food production. Some of our largest employers are a bakery and the United Dairy, who is just continuing to grow and get a bigger footprint. And Tim Derrickson was in last week, actually. We were fortunate enough, tremendous individual. But I've always thought that Ohio was positioned logistically because of our positioning of population, and we're kind of on the eastern edge of the main part of the agricultural part of the United States, that food processing, when you take the population, we're the west side of the main part of the population of the eastern half of the United States. And so, you know, it's a great place to produce food because you're close to your source, but you're also close to your customer. And so it's another sector that Jobs Ohio continues to work very diligently at. And just, again, I can't state enough the partnership that local communities have with what has been created with Jobs Ohio and in our case, Ohio FC.
Thanks, Larry. And I will say just, and I think you all know probably better than most, but you can win a lot and you still have detractors, and it's just the nature of everything. But some folks that I interact with, and I go back to Steubenville, and if I could land an Intel deal or something there, that'd be great. And you get some people that are frustrated and say, well, you know, Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland, they win the most, or you guys don't bring us projects. When we work on projects, we operate a real estate database that, you know, if a company says we need 500 acres of rail served property, we'll send them everything that we have. But there are certain projects that fit better, just like the cracker site. It's the perfect fit. But if I could bring a few huge deals to Eastern Ohio, I would do it. But there's a lot of different things that have to come together to make a good location win. And we're feeling the heat between us. Folks in Cincinnati are rather upset that they didn't win the Intel deal. Well, last time I checked, there's not 1,500 acres in the Cincinnati area that's developable like that gets you kind of close to the ecosystem, but also has the property and infrastructure. And so I just throw that out there because when I go back to Eastern Ohio, specifically Jefferson County, they say, well, great that you're back, but you never do anything for us. And it's a little bit more complicated than that. So bear with us. We're trying to win and spend a lot of time over there.
Matt, to that I would add that it takes the communities caring and, you know, getting some skin in the game. And, you know, we've seen some counties in the Appalachian portion of the state, begin to do that, with
Yep.
partnership with Larry. Noble County is kind of coming around to the idea that the local community has a big part in getting ready to be prepared for economic development wins. And some of these communities have just, kind of fallen asleep at the wheel over the past decade on, making their own investments. And so that's been an important best practice that we've learned from Belmont County and Noble is, yes, we're topography challenged, but there are opportunities if, you're forward thinking and you're risk taking enough and
Yep.
find the right partners.
Well said, Gwen. I think Muskingum County is a perfect example. I don't give Larry any credit. He left there a long time ago, but Larry did a lot getting industrial parks set up. Mike Jacoby was there, and then Matt Abbott, who's at the port now. We work with him all the time, and the counties that are prepared, they're inclusive. They team up with all of us. It makes winning the deal a lot easier when you have that team approach. So any other questions, thoughts, disagreements? This hydrogen thing, this past year, I've been trying to learn a lot more about it, and it's picking up a lot of speed. So if you or colleagues are talking about hydrogen and you have some points or thoughts, feel free to share them with me, because I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out what the opportunity is. So I certainly don't plan to or pretend to be an expert. I'm just trying to educate myself and understand where things are headed. So
I've got a question I'd throw out there related to the hydrogen thing. So with like natural gas development and pipeline development, there's clear impact on landowners, right? Leasing rights, all this kind of thing. So with hydrogen maybe coming into the future, and we think about people we work with, whether it's a landowner or a farmer, is there anything we can anticipate that impacts them that maybe isn't already in place? Like there's already established infrastructure.
Yeah, very, very good question. There will need to be, assuming this whole hydrogen thing plays out, especially on the blue hydrogen side, there will need to be new pipelines built, hydrogen pipelines. Some natural gas pipelines can handle up to, there's differing opinions in the size and scope of the line, up to 10 to 20% of natural gas pipelines can handle a blend of hydrogen. But there will need to be new hydrogen pipe built out. So that's one piece, just like any other kind of pipeline. So potential, right of way and other impact on property owners and potential financial benefits. The other thing is that carbon capture sequestration. If that happens, and it's pretty prevalent, it's similar to mineral rights, but basically if a company were to inject the carbon into that geological formation underneath someone's property, they would have to receive the rights to do that. But rather than extracting the minerals, they're injecting the carbon dioxide into the rock. So there are actually some legal fights right now about it's called the pore, instead of mineral rights, it's the pore spacing and the pore spacing rights. Basically, how does that all happen? So there's a lot to learn there, but it would be, in our minds, it's similar to mineral rights, where some folks would get some sort of royalty for allowing the carbon to be injected into the rock. And these are layers that are several miles underground, so much deeper than anything that's being drilled or being produced.
So Matt, this has nothing to do with we had a speaker a few months back, and he discussed liquid CO2 being used to displace crude oil. So this wouldn't be anything like that.
It could be part of that. To you inject the CO2 and then you displace the crude oil, get the crude oil out and produce other products. I don't know the economics of that. Apparently that varies from location to location, and I don't know, Dan, all the details, but that they can be connected if the right situation exists.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the depth, and I was wondering if that kind of would take that out of the picture as far as going too deep. With the crude
Yeah.
oil.
It all depends on the geological layers and things like that. I'll show real quick. Go back to this image. What you're talking about, Dan, is over here on this enhanced oil recovery. So you take the CO2, inject it, and then you displace the oil and you pull that out and make other products out of it. That's kind of this piece. The companies that we're talking to primarily are focused on this kind of part of it, sticking it down there and leaving it down there.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
You bet.
So in theory, is that similar then to the same types of agreements that farm or landowners would be using for brine injection?
Yeah, I think so, Gwen. Although again, different in terms of just different aspects and permitting and all that. But yeah, similar. So yeah, I failed to mention a brine injection well. Similar concept overall, but I think the attorneys are trying to figure out how to make that work and make themselves some money, of course.
All right. Very nice discussion. Great presentation. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Larry. It was a great program.
Appreciate it.
Nice job, Matt.
Thanks, everybody.
Right. And
Thank you.
thanks for coming, Larry.
All right. Well, you all have a good day.
You too. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
Thank
Larry.
you. Bye-bye.